Welcome to Not Your Typical Church Ladies, faith conversations for your real life. I'm Vicky, and each week I am joined with my fellow workers in the vineyard, Anne and Karen, to break open the Sunday scriptures and talk about life and faith and everything in between. Join your Not Typical Church Ladies on this journey each week.
Welcome back, everybody. We are on our last Sunday of our John Discourse, the 21st Sunday in Ordinary Time for August 25th already. Holy cow. And we are talking again with Anne and Vicky. Hello, ladies.
Hey.
And we got a little bit of everything. And so we told everybody to put your life jackets on the last couple of weeks. And today we get to take them off. I think we came to the conclusion. And but we got some hard truths to talk about today. So let's look at the first reading, though, because there's a lot of good connections from the first reading to our gospel. So what did you guys pick up, and what do you want to share your thoughts with the first reading?
So I just think this is a cool one to end on because it feels like a decision day, right? Like we've come on this journey through John 6, and the Israelites have come through the desert, and this is the moment where Joshua is actually going to lead them into the promised land. But I like how even though it's the culmination of this whole journey, like people still have a choice, right? Like God doesn't force anybody to live this life, and each person ultimately has to make their own decision about who they're going to stand with, and as we all do. And that mirrors our gospel story today so wonderfully too. It's just like, okay, but for you, what's the answer? What are you going to say about all this?
Right. Vicky, what are your thoughts?
I was a little, I don't know. Every time I read this one, for some reason, I was just like a little on fire with it. And for me, the idea of there's two movements in it for me. The first one is him reminding everyone about the fact that like you get to choose, right? It is free will. You get to choose who you're going to follow. You get to choose to say yes, right? That is the ultimate thing we all have. But then the other part, which I love too, is this reminder from the people of what God has done for them. And like how often when times are hard, does something look like a better option for us? But we forget that of all the gifts and blessings we have in our lives. And for me, those were like the two big movements of this thing, this reminder that you get to choose, but in that choice, something might look greener, but remember all that you have been, all that God has given you already when you're making that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of like, yeah, when you said decision day, it brought the they never had it when I was in school. This became a new thing, but like everyone wore their shirts of the colleges that they were going to go to. Like it's decision day. And it's like, oh, well, I'll do the University of God, like I will do this. And even though, I'm jumping a little bit, but it's hard to not because of the connection of the first reading with the second reading or with the gospel. But like, okay, I'll wait for that. All right, what else do we? Because otherwise it's just going to ruin it and it's just going to go in. So, I do love the fact that we do have choices. But Vicky, like you were saying, like is our choice to move away or do something different, is it even going to be better? We may think that it is at that time, but I know in my life, I'm like, okay, the grass is greener over here, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm like, man, it is brown, it is desolate, and I wish that I had just stayed over there. But it is good for us. One of the things that when I was reading, the question was, how do we as a church respond when faced with ideas that confuse us? And I just thought that that was
Mm.
really powerful, because here we're hearing all of these things about the greatness of God, yet we are in this institution, church, and there are things that confuse us and make us angry and get us wild up. But what is it that keeps us from not going to something greener that we think is something greener? So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah,
Any thoughts on that?
no, I feel that. I feel that. And I was thinking too in the first reading that it reminded me of that exercise in the spiritual exercises. I know we've all done the exercises of Ignatius, but when it's the two standards, right? Because
Yeah.
Ignatius was a soldier, and so in his imagination, he developed this prayer practice where he imagined, there were two armies under two different banners, and that he had to choose which one he was going to fight for, which one he was going to give his life for, and I don't know, it came to mind when I read that first reading again, because it's more than just like making the choices about like where you're going to live and how you're going to serve and where you're going to worship, and how you're going to be in community. But like we all make sort of like that initial fundamental orientation of like which direction are we going to point our lives
Right.
towards, right? Are they going to point towards God, or are they going to point towards self-serving things, or something else?
Yeah.
And with as complicated as all our choices can be, as long as we've got that first choice made right, it sets the direction for everything else.
Yeah, and how important is that? Like we've talked about community so much. So like is our decision because we're serving God and others, or is it because we are thinking that it should be serving us? Right? So like, the first reading, it said, if it does not please you to serve the Lord, decide today who you're going to serve. Like, like, but it's not, it really, in all essence, it is not about us individually. It's about us in our relationship with God and how that relationship affects our other relationships and things like that. All right. Anything else that we want to talk about? The second reading from Ephesians, it was
Skip
like,
it.
Yeah,
okay,
I will take this
that
one
one.
only because so you all know we record these early, and August 25th is actually my wedding anniversary.
Oh,
So happy wedding anniversary to my loving husband, who is in his like very lapsed Catholic way. When I was reading through this and getting annoyed, he goes, yeah, but ultimately it's just telling us we're supposed to love and cherish one another. And I was like, all right, mic drop, book
Yeah,
closed.
okay, but
yeah. So if you haven't read ahead to know what we are talking about, this reading is all about, husbands, love your wives, wives, be subservient to your husband, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure there's like a bigger meaning to it, but we only are seeing the outside, and the three of us are just like, yeah, no. Okay. So if you want to read it, go ahead. If you have any other insights that we are missing because we got stuck on that subservient part, let us know, because we'd love to hear. All right. But we're going to jump to the gospel, because that's, the important. And this is our last reading of the John, I am the bread of life discourse. And, we can't take our life vests off just yet, because we have some hard truths and some choices that Jesus is like, he's not sugarcoating anything. And he knows that in the human perspective, in the human mind, we cannot comprehend this. But he still doesn't hold back and try to be like, okay, well, if you think you want to, he's just like, no, this is how it's going to be. So, ladies, I have some thoughts, but I want you to share first. So let's dive in. Who would like to start? Or do you want me to start? Because I do have.
I guess I just wanted to start with a note because we jumped. We're following through the whole chapter. So just as a reminder to everyone, right before this, Jesus says, "This is the bread that came down from heaven. Unlike your ancestors who ate and still died, whoever eats this bread will live forever." So that is the end of the teaching that they are now going over. So
Yeah.
just like to
Right.
get the mind
Recap.
blowingness of what's happening here, that's what Jesus
Yep.
just dropped on everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And also remember last week we were talking, Jesus brought in the whole like eat the flesh and drink the blood and like wait a minute, I thought you were talking about bread. Now you're talking about flesh. So yeah, thanks Vicky for that connection. I'm gonna jump to the end of the gospel where Simon Peter answers Jesus, and I
Gotta love him.
have a newfound love for Simon. Okay, Simon Peter, and I think it's because of The Chosen. I don't know why. I may have a little crush on Simon Peter in The Chosen, but for as all of the stuff that he has grappled with, he's just like, nope, this is what I'm doing. This is what we're doing. And when he says, or no, Jesus asks if the disciples want to leave, the 12. And Simon Peter answers, Master, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe. I love that. We have come to believe and are convinced that you are the Holy One of God. And it got me thinking, like, could you imagine just dropping your whole entire life and following this guy for months? And then he says something so crazy that you can't comprehend it, but you're like, if I don't continue to follow him, then what were these last several months? Like, why did I waste? Like, that's what came to my head. Like, they just dropped their fishing nets and went. And what do they have to show for if they decide now just to like pack up and leave? So I found that really like, but it was more than like, we have come to believe. So I like that because it wasn't like as soon as they met Jesus, they knew like they have come to believe based on what he was doing, what he was saying, the miracles. It was like this progression of faith. And how often do we have this progression of faith, right? There are things that we're like, oh yeah, I'm totally in. And then something will happen. You're like, not sure, but let me look into that. Let me pray on that. And then, so I love that it wasn't like, we believe, we have come to believe. What are your...
Yeah, it was a process, right? And it was very personal. And again, they did it in community too, right? He's like, who, and so this is Peter speaking on behalf of the group, right?
Right.
Which is an expression for Peter as a leader, right? Because he's going to be the rock that Jesus built his church on, but he's so human, but he's so like, I love that, like we are convinced, like you said, Jesus has proven through his relationship with his followers and his friends who he is, and they know he can be trusted, right? It's like they've come to believe, but it's more than that. They've come to trust him and to be like intimate with him, right? Like, I mean, that for like, to whom should we go? Well, where else are we going to go? You have the words of everlasting life, right? It's all of, this is it. This is the whole game right here, right? Like, no, I just love that passage. Yeah.
It's just,
well, yeah, it's so beautiful. And, like Simon Peter gets it wrong so many times. So when he gets it right in the gospel, you're like, yes, like there you go. But I love too in it that at the beginning, Jesus doesn't like, he hears the murmurings and he hears this, and he doesn't try to stop anyone from choosing what they're going to choose. He was like, I have given you the truth. What you do with it now is yours, right? He's not trying to keep people. He's not trying to apologize. He's not trying to pull them back. And he's respectful of it. And I also think too, the idea that we have to remember all the way to the beginning of when we started this podcast series 4 weeks ago, all those people had witnessed a miracle, not,
Mhm.
thought we were just gonna make food. This isn't really what I signed up for. I'm piecing out here. So to have witnessed what they had witnessed and still not then be able to take that leap is just heartbreaking. And I think that's why Jesus doesn't force any, again, that free will we keep talking about.
Yeah.
They're just not there yet. And I think too, for the 12, this idea like where else where like what else should we do? We know, they were just so deeply grounded already in their faith. Now remember, this faith still gets tested, and we all go through Holy Week together and know what happened with them there. But at this point, this hard truth of what Jesus came to teach, they're like, no, like we might not totally get it. Remember, like Peter's not saying, oh yeah, we understand this. He's just like, we know enough to know that what you're saying is true, and we have to stick with you and keep by your side. Even if we don't understand it, we'll keep working through it with you.
No, it's interesting. And you had said earlier, it was your dialect of how you said that, or how you said Simon Peter's answer that made me wonder if like it wasn't like what am I trying to say? Like when Jesus asked, "Do you want to leave?" and Simon Peter, I took it as like, no, no, we don't want to leave. But like
Mhm.
the way that you dialected your answer made me wonder if like Peter was like, well, why would you think we would want to like it was almost like Simon Peter was questioning Jesus on why he would even think that they would want to leave.
Mhm.
The way that you
Yeah.
made it sound to me, and I was like, oh, that's kind of
Yeah.
a different take on it. Like, was Peter like, why would you even ask something like that? Or was he like,
Maybe.
no,
I know
yeah, I'm not going
we don't
anywhere.
get body language or like tone from reading scripture, right? That's why
Right.
it's so rich. The
Yeah, it was
same
just the
passage.
way you had said it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I wonder if there was a different like response to that in the same thing.
Mhm.
So, um, but one thing that I kept going back to, I don't know how many of you know my story, but about 11, oh my gosh, probably 11 or 12 years ago already, my cousin Alex was one of the ones murdered in the Colorado theater. And I remember like half of my family was like, why does God let bad things happen? And then the other half of us, just like when it got hard, we prayed and we went to church and we like just immersed ourselves with the generosity of God and the graces that we've had as a family. So like the question, what do we do when things get hard?
Yeah. I just, we've all had ups and downs in our relationship with the church, but I just can't imagine walking away from the Eucharist. Like it's such a central part of my faith. I can't imagine walking away from it.
I
You
mean,
know?
for church, I say that. I think in life, that other part, like, what do you do? I mean, like, with my story, I tried everything else. And the beauty is, the more I was angry at God, the more he intimately tried to show me his love and help guide me back. And so when that is, when you have that experience, and when he led me back to the church, for me, that is the ultimate reminder of the things people do, but ultimately God is the person who led me back to church, and he led me to this church, and he led me to the Eucharist again. And so when everything else fails, I know that is true, and I know that is where he is, and I know that's what helps me to thrive and go from surviving to thriving in many times.
Well, the line in there about like that Jesus knew from the beginning the ones that would not believe,
Mm.
and he knew the one who would betray him. But he still has gone on this whole journey back from, the multiplication of the loaves and fishes and all of the teaching that he's done since then. And um, it's like you said, Vicky, he doesn't try to force anybody, but like the divine aspect of him knew already who was going to stay and who was going to go.
Yeah.
But the human aspect of him must have felt, rejected, that like that leaving and that sad. I'm thinking about, when we prepare kids for confirmation, and like, so we have this big group of kids, and like, I want all of them to know how much God loves them, and to have like this adventure of discipleship in their lives, and like to just like to be on fire, right? I want to like just change their lives. And I know that they're not all going to stay ultimately in their lives in the end. Some of them are going to stay and be amazing, active Catholics for their whole lives, and some of them aren't. And ultimately, I can't control that. And I don't know who it is. Like, that's in God's eyes, not in my eyes. But like, everybody needs to receive the invitation, right? So like, there's the generosity of Jesus still inviting, even though he knows it's not going to be accepted by everybody. That just really got me this time reading through this.
Yeah.
Because it just breaks your heart to know that not your words and your efforts might not make a difference in all the ways you want them to, but like they do make a difference. We just don't see all the ways, maybe. I don't know.
Mhm.
Not everyone can be Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like there was a comment in one of the readings I was looking at, and it says that like our faith requires us to leave behind the comforts of daily life, putting the needs of others first. And I got laughing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like that's all I do is put the needs of others first. Like, what? Why people don't?
Yeah.
And like
That's that mom thing.
it must be, yeah. But thinking like what you were saying about Jesus, like how heartbroken he must have been, but he knew that he needed to put the lives of his followers ahead of him. Like he needed to just let others, he needed to serve others, and get them to where he knew they could be. I just like that.
And he didn't like, it wasn't just these 5,000 people who left. It like the gospel says, like many of his disciples, like the people who had been with him for a while, even many of them could not accept this teaching.
Yeah.
Um,
And how crazy is that? Like they spent all these months together. They severed relationships when they left to follow Jesus, and like how they must have felt to like go back and try to either bend that or basically just pick up and start all over again. Like I can't, that to me is just, I don't know. That thought of like going back with your tail between your legs. I don't know. All right. Well, any other comments?
I just think that when Jesus asks, like, does this shock you? Like, do you find this shocking? I don't know. Like my modern ear is like hearing a lot of snark in that comment, and I'm sure that is not that's not what Jesus intended. But it's just one of those like, does this shock you? But then I thought about it. I was like, you know what? When you think about it, like Jesus is shocking. He's totally shocking. Like his birth was shocking. His life was shocking. His death, his resurrection, the whole Paschal mystery, like all of it is shocking.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So
we've had
that's like it. Go ahead.
But we've had like thousands of years to grapple with this.
Right.
Like
right.
we have. I can't imagine the disciples like in their last, was it last week when they're like, this is just Mary and Joseph's kid. Like,
Right.
like they didn't
Right.
have that concept of grappling with that difference of what we know today.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and it's just right, we hear it and it just sounds like, I don't know, traditional religious stuff, but like it was shocking. Like Jesus is
yeah,
shocking. He's like incarnation,
right.
like all these mysteries, like all of them like are rich with meaning, but yeah, they're amazing. And you can't like really get to like the whole idea of there are mysteries that you solve and then there are mysteries that you like live into and explore, but you never really get to the bottom of.
Yeah.
Like the Eucharist is like that, and the incarnation is like that, and the Paschal mystery is like that, and so many things in our faith are just like maybe it's not always about accepting, but it's about exploring, or just being
Yeah.
open and experiencing the mysteries. We can get really caught up in like the head stuff, like the intellectual assent to certain teachings. But I think, speaking for myself, what always keeps drawing me back to the church is the heart experience, so the lived experience of being in community and being formed through the faith of others over the generations and in this particular community where we are now. Um, that's like the life-giving bread, right? It's in that daily reception of the sacraments and of the just the daily nourishment we get from being in community too. It's not always about like the head stuff for me.
Yeah, I have friends who are different Christian faiths. So like in high school, we would all go with each other to like church and do all that. And you know, there is something like lived experience, like for me, being at these other masses or services and not having the ritual of the Eucharist the way that Catholics celebrate it. And I was
Mhm.
at one of my friends' churches and I didn't receive, but they had like a loaf of bread and they broke it up and passed it out. And then the leftovers they brought downstairs for the youth group to like snack on with dip after. And I'm like,
Huh.
um, uh, and now I'm not saying that that's not wrong in, but like growing up Catholic, the Eucharist is so sacred and this like it has to go in the tabernacle and all of this, and all of a sudden everyone's just like eating it. I'm like, oh, okay. Um, but I feel like that's what that's what is there's something about receiving that sacred nourishment in a way that we have been taught what it means to us. There's a different I don't know, heart feeling around it and the change and the transformation than for me than if it was just a mere symbol, knowing the essence. Do I completely understand how it happens? Absolutely not. But the belief in what it is after that um does help me, like that grounded um heart movement that you were saying. And yeah. All right. I think like this is the fourth time I said any last minute comments. We could keep going for like probably like another hour, but anything else that you want to share before we conclude our John discourse for our summer series? All right, everybody. Thank you again. We hope that you have enjoyed this new edition of the summer series of Not Your Typical Church Ladies. And just enjoy the rest of your summer, what's left. And I am sure we will be seeing you Advent of 2024 after we take a couple breathers of getting back into the swing of things of the school year. So thank you all very much, and we will see you next time.
A great rest of your summer, everybody.
Happy summer. On behalf of Anne, Karen, and myself, thank you again for listening to this episode of Faith Conversations for Your Real Life. Please make sure to subscribe to wherever you're listening or watching this episode. You can find the readings linked in the description box below, and we can't wait to see you again next time on Faith Conversations for Your Real Life with your favorite not so typical church ladies.